In Heidegger's article Building Dwelling Thinking, the bridge is described as an element to gather the fourfold. Therefore, he's creating a relation between building and dwelling. The bridge as a thing, as a building, is able to connect us to the fourfold, and the fourfold to us. In this slide, I added my first two attempts of the ring form model, where we had to embody our code. The stick below the paper roll is representing Earth and the mortals, and the other one is connected to the stick that is placed underneath the roll to show that it is, in a way, gathering the fourfold. In this slide, I added my first trig end model to embody my code. I have decided to place these two elements at the two ends of the base. The paper roll and sticks are representing Earth and mortals, and the plane is representing sky and divinities. I'm gonna be presenting next the fauna and the flora in Lebanon, and mainly in Beirut, by mentioning the most important information that helped me develop my project and discover the type of soils present in my site to know which plants can be planted and which birds can be called. Sand looks formless, but even formless has a form. If we look at the sand under a microscope, as shown in the first picture, we can see a whole different image and appearance. We think that sand is formless when we look at it, but they decide their form themselves. So we can relate this to the notion of thingness. Even nothing and everything are things themselves. Sand is the only visible patina of time. Just like the layers of the Rausche rock as shown in the pictures, they show the layers of time. In our site, we are mainly working with limestone sands, so the purpose of this research was to study the composition of our site in order to know how to deal with the ground and the constructions. The Lebanese geological context is very complex, presenting a very large spatial variability of soils within a very small area. The geology of Beirut and its suburbs shows that the subsoil can be classified into two main categories, sandy areas, as we can see in the first picture, and limestones or marly limestone spaces, as shown in the second picture. The Ashrafiyya Hill and the eastern part of the peninsula of Beirut, the west side of Nahar Beirut, but also the Rausche rock, consist of Helvetic marls and limestones. In this slide, the first picture is the Alpes Mountains in France, and the second picture is the Rausche rock in Beirut, and they are actually made of the same type of rocks, which are the Helvetic marls and limestones. In this first map, we can see that the port of Beirut is in green, which shows that it belongs to the Cenomanian stage and the Miocene field. And the second map, we can see that it is mainly composed of marly limestone, calcite, and conglomerate rocks. In this slide, I'm showing the difference between marly limestone in the first picture and conglomerate rocks in the second picture. This is my materials rendering. And here are some close-ups. Lebanon is rich in flora, with over 3,000 species, the country though not having a great quantity of flowers, but the quality of these flowers is always found here. Tulipa alipensis, which is a kind of tulips found in some regions of the Middle East, is also found in Lebanon. These plants are up to 30 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide. The plant produces only a single cup-shaped flower, which is intensely red or crimson on the outside and slightly paler on the inside, as you can see in these pictures. The plant can be up to 45 centimeters tall. The flowers appear from March to May, as the plant is only found on cultivated land and it needs a good drainage. This flower is the Lebanese cyclamen. This plant has a length ranging from 3 to 14 centimeters. The flowers range from 1 to 4 centimeters long. This flower appears from winter to spring, from October to April, with 5 oval petals opening white and turning pale pink. The tuber only produces roots from one side of the bottom. It flourishes in winter, but we can make it bloom again from one year to the next. Wheat is a grass widely cultivated for its seed, that is, a cereal grain. Due to the explosion, the grains that were stocked in the silos fell all around the silos. So when we visited the port, the wheat was so visible as shown in the third picture that I took when we went to the port. So in order to grow wheat, the most suitable type of soil is the loamy soil. This type of soil consists of clay and sand, which is found at the port. Therefore, it's the best soil for growing crops like wheat as they need enough ventilation of air. In the coastal sites of Lebanon, we can find many different species of birds. However, I will be counting the most seen birds near the port and at the Corniche of Beirut, which will be called through my project. Apart from the expected house sparrow and rock-dove pigeon, the most common bird in the more natural spaces was the stonechat, the third bird. Nevertheless, in this area northern wheater and a pair of common kingfisher are also seen. The yellow-vented bulbul birds make quick appearances and the graceful prenia are everywhere among the natural scrub. In this slide we can see the port before and after the blast. In this picture I can find peace, and peace is in the fact that we can still recognize the silos even if they are half destroyed. They remained even after the explosion and despite the strength of the blast. In these two pictures we can see the ashes, the ruins and the traces from after the explosion and the blast. So just by looking at them, we can feel everything that we already felt when it happened, so they are trying to convey sad emotions. In this next slide, we can observe a state of elevation to show the resistance of the silos that are still there even after the explosion and to show the force of the explosion. And this is the current state of the port. This is how our destroyed and demolished port looks like today after the explosion. The asymmetry of the blast was due to the presence of Beirut's grain silos. Standing west of the blast's epicenter, the silos worked extremely well as a massive concrete wall shielding the western area of the city, and saving so many lives at the moment of the explosion. So a massive structure that survives an explosion but still stands must be preserved, not destroyed or replaced. So this is why I have decided to keep the silos and create a bird sanctuary. Birds are always interested in food and water. Different sounds can alert them to available resources. One of the best type of sounds to attract birds is water splashes. In addition to that, birds are naturally attracted to bright colors, which will be present on my site through the two types of flowers stated earlier and the wheat. Birds also look for a safe space to call their home, as well as somewhere they can be social. So that's why 3 of the silos are gonna be open from the top, and you'll be able to see that in the last slide. So in this slide, we can see my 1/1000 site model and its top view drawing. All around the site, I'm gonna plant palm trees, and that's why I represented them by Q-tips instead of pins to express their width. As for the circles, they represent areas of grass where I will be planting on them, depending on the month, a type of the 3 types of flowers that I mentioned in my research. So every time 7,500 plants are gonna be planted in honor of the injuries caused by the blast, but here I connected each 4 circles by threads to show that the whole surface is gonna be planted. And I placed this folded room in here because I want people to come in ferry boats and visit my whole site. And these are some close-ups of my first 1/100 sectional model. Activate the mechanism by this part. This stick at first it's gonna be in the water, so when I activate the mechanism it's gonna be elevated from behind, but it's gonna be lowered from the front of the model. However, we decided to remove this old mechanism and create a new one, which is the tourbillon mechanism, composed of one stick and this cutted cylinder. And I cut it in this way to be able to splash water from it. So when I activate the mechanism, the cylinder is gonna turn out with balance and splash water all around it to be able to call and attract the birds. As already said, in my first sectional study model, I only had this part of the mechanism, but then we replaced it with the tourbillon mechanism, which is similar to the second part of my mechanism. But for my final 1/100 model, we decided to include both of the mechanisms that were used in the previous study models. At the beginning, the stick is in the water. So after activating the mechanism, the stick, which is a thin tube, will be elevated from the back and lowered from the front to carry the water. After that, the second part of the mechanism will be activated to transfer the water and to finally splash it in a semicircular motion in order to call the birds and attract them. When the birds arrive to the site, the 3 silos will be opened from the top for the birds to come and dwell in them. As for the room, I placed it from behind so people can sit inside the silo if they are not scared of birds, or outside to just look at the sea and the birds flying above or behind them at the same time. And finally, here's my 1/50 model, which is a more detailed view of the room that I included in my silo. This is my final conceptual drawing, and the reason why I didn't render the whole tree is because I wanted to give my drawing a non-finito effect. And I would like to conclude my presentation with some pictures taken during our visit to the port.